Hello everyone, our topic today was requested by Stephanie Reinking. We'll be going over Ardyn from Final Fantasy XV. For those who haven't played Final Fantasy XV's episode Ardyn, consider this your spoiler warning.
So, first things first, Ardyn Izunia, true name Ardyn Lucis Caelum, is the final boss and overarching antagonist for the Final Fantasy XV game. Not uniquely among such archvillains, Ardyn's story is one that begins and ends tragically, but by no means excuses his abhorrent behavior. To better understand Ardyn, we first need to do a little bit of world setup. In the world of Final Fantasy XV, the summons, commonly seen throughout the series, Ifrit, Shiva, and Bahamut, for example, are considered gods. And whether they control fate or not, they do enforce the will or flow or whatever of fate. This will be important later. They can also bestow their power upon mortals, and roughly 2,000 years before Final Fantasy XV begins, they bestowed their powers upon two bloodlines. One bloodline was given the power of the Oracle, the other bloodline was given guardianship of the crystal. The Oracles had the ability to communicate directly with the gods, as well as heal those infected by it. The Guardians of the Crystal, which was essentially the soul of the planet itself, were allowed to tap into the crystal's power, granting them the powers of light to help them combat the Star Scourge.
The Star Scourge itself is a seemingly magical disease that, very oddly, actually evolved from a strain of malaria. Again, a little more than 2,000 years before the start of the game. And this was a pretty serious mutation, too. The Star Scourge infects living things, sickening them until their bodies begin to blacken and wither, while the infected creature loses strength. When the infected eventually die, their bodies turn to dust, and this dust eventually gives rise to what the game simply calls demons. Monstrous creatures coming in various shapes and sizes that, like the Star Scourge itself, are vulnerable to light, specifically ultraviolet light. The disease's cells, and resultantly the demons formed from Star Scourge dust, are cleansed by sunlight. Demons literally vaporize, and on a cellular level, the Star Scourge is rendered sterile and harmless. However, the disease fights this death, releasing small clouds of black fog called the miasma, from demons that tries to block the light of the sun from them. While on an individual level this miasma is not powerful enough to save demons from the disintegrating light of day, when enough creatures have fallen victim to the Star Scourge in a localized area, the world can appear darker. Indeed, the Star Scourge's spread and growth plays a major role in Final Fantasy XV, and as more and more of the world succumbs to the disease, the number of sunlit daylight hours in a given 24-hour period actually shrink, until by the game's end, the world has literally been shrouded in eternal nightfall for years because the Star Scourge had spread and multiplied to such a ludicrous degree.
This brings us to Ardyn. Ardyn was born a little over 2,000 years before the start of the game, and he and his brother Somnus were the heirs to the bloodline granted stewardship over the crystal, and resultantly power to fight the darkness. One of them was also going to be ordained by the gods as the king of the region. But until that decision was made, they both set out doing their best to curb the spread of the Star Scourge, which had, presumably recently, risen to epidemic levels. Somnus went about doing so in the standard ye olde ways that one handles a plague, by rounding up the infected and burning them all in the hopes of keeping this disease from spreading. Ardyn, on the other hand, had been gifted, presumably by the same gods who had given he and his brother stewardship over the crystal, the ability to cure people of the Star Scourge by absorbing another person's illness into his own body. Thus, he traveled the countryside curing his people and hiding his growing illness. The people loved him for it, and eventually the Oracle was told by the gods that Ardyn had been chosen to be king. Now, it should be noted that the exact details of what happened next are different depending upon whether you watch the anime episode Ardyn Prologue or play the episode Ardyn DLC. But the end results are the same, and dialogue from the DLC indicates that the events from the anime seem roughly accurate. Those events being that Ardyn, upon touching the crystal to confirm his status as the rightful king, was rejected. The gods decided, only then, for some reason, that his body and soul had been too corrupted by the Star Scourge he had absorbed, with the power they'd given him, to be the rightful ruler. However, there was some form of duplicity at work here. Again, the game and anime differ on the exactitude somewhat, and so Ardyn's brother Somnus tried to kill Ardyn so that Somnus's claim to the throne could be legitimized. In the process, the Oracle, Ardyn's beloved, was slain by Somnus's hand. Ardyn was struck with such grief, pain, and outrage that the Star Scourge within him was allowed to boil to the surface, uniquely granting him immense power and legitimate immortality. Somnus and his people were unable to slay Ardyn, and so they instead locked him away and erased nearly all mention of him from the histories.
At this point, Ardyn had reached his full power, though he wouldn't master the intricacies of controlling his abilities until much later. As a former guardian of the crystal, and prior to his corruption one worthy of being the fully fledged king, Ardyn possesses, even after his corruption, all of the abilities of an exceptionally powerful king. For those familiar with the game, this means he can do everything the game's protagonist Noctis can do at max level. For everyone else, he can conjure numerous weapons at will. He's capable of wielding a sword in one moment and conjuring a spear, crossbow, or other weapon the next. He can also telekinetically and simultaneously control these weapons, allowing him to strike multiple times and from multiple angles all at once. He can hurl a weapon to a distant location and then teleport to said weapon, and also has limited powers of flight. Additionally, he can cast elemental magics and empower items with the ability to heal himself or others. Prior to being locked away, Ardyn could also suck the Star Scourge out of those afflicted by it, and though he's never shown using this ability again thereafter, it can be safely assumed he still possesses said ability. Since awakening as, essentially, the living embodiment of the Star Scourge, however, he has gained numerous other abilities. He can disperse into a miasmic cloud, allowing him to fly independently of his kingly abilities. He also possesses some form of shape-shifting or possession capability, as he's been seen walking around seemingly in other people's bodies. He can create illusory images, apparently stop time, and even corrupt other beings with the Star Scourge, instantly turning them into demons, gaining a small power boost, as well as all of his victims' memories. He also has intense powers of regeneration, such that, though he is functionally a demon, and thus harmed by the light of the sun, he regenerates at such a speed that he remains effectively unharmed, despite not taking any less damage from the sunlight. This translates into full-blown immortality. He can only be slain by the Chosen King, the game's protagonist, Noctis. All of this is, of course, very dangerous, but what makes it all worse is that Ardyn also possesses a coldly, brilliantly calculating mind and a truly iron will.
Keeping all of that in mind, Ardyn is locked away for 2,000 years and forgotten by history. His brother Somnus founds a kingdom that flourishes, and with the help of the gods and the next oracle, all but wipes out the Star Scourge, which resurges dangerously once or twice during that time frame, but generally stays at seemingly manageable levels. Until the day when a scientist from a different kingdom, seeking to learn more about the demons and the Star Scourge, specifically how to weaponize them for his country's good, finds and frees Ardyn from his long imprisonment. Ardyn takes about 7 months to recover enough to have his faculties intact, during which time the scientist gleefully studies his acquisition. Once Ardyn was all there again, the scientist showed him that they had Ifrit, the god of fire, in stasis in his lab, and suggested that Ardyn try to corrupt Ifrit into a demon, since he was fairly certain Ardyn possesses a degree of control over demons he created, if not all demons. Ardyn was initially appalled by the idea. He had been a good and pious man before his imprisonment, dedicated to stopping the spread of the Star Scourge. He wasn't the type of man to try and corrupt one of his gods. However, shortly thereafter, Ardyn and the lab were attacked by a group of elite soldiers from the nation Somnus raised, part of a select group that still knew of Ardyn's existence, who were intent on putting him back in his tomb. Ardyn found himself hallucinating the face of his traitorous brother on the faces of his would-be captors, and fought them. While doing so, they accidentally freed Ifrit, who was perturbed at his capture by mortals and was surprised to recognize Ardyn. Seemingly surrounded by Somnuses, though they were easily dispatched, Ardyn awakened a bit to his desire for vengeance on his brother, and, barring that, his progeny, and so entreated Ifrit for help in securing his revenge. When Ifrit refused, Ardyn corrupted the fire god instead, demonifying Ifrit and making him a thrall to Ardyn's will. Yes, he enslaved a god.
Ifrit, like any other creature turned demon by Ardyn's will, granted Ardyn all of his memories. It was at this point that Ardyn learned, according to the DLC, that he'd originally been chosen as king, and that the Oracle had told his brother this, leading to Somnus' betrayal, and subsequently to the Oracle's death. During a hallucination brought on by this knowledge, the Oracle begged Ardyn to kill her for her betrayal, claiming that if she had never told Somnus first, none of this would have happened, making all these horrible events her fault. Ardyn initially refused, but then a hallucination of Somnus appeared, forcing Ardyn to kill her and mocking him afterward. In the aftermath of this ugly imagery, Ardyn's will focused and he swore vengeance on Somnus, his bloodline, and the kingdom they had raised, railing against the gods and all but daring them to try and stop him from wiping out their chosen champions. After these events, Ardyn and the scientist worked together for several years, increasing the power of their kingdom. The scientist rose in favor, and Ardyn became the Chancellor of the realm. During this time, he also began slowly spreading the Star Scourge, gobbling up people around the world in order to better supplement his growing understanding of this new era, which is when he discovered the existence of the Old Wall, a last line of defense protecting the capital of Somnus' nation. Like Ardyn and Somnus before them, each king of that nation was a guardian, a mighty warrior, and many of their souls were housed in great golems that could be activated by the current king's command in the event of catastrophe. Among these kingly golems was Ardyn's long-lost brother. Ardyn now realized he had the chance for the direct revenge he originally believed that the passage of time had stolen from him.
Working together with the scientists to mount an attack on Somnus' nation, Ardyn confronted the modern-day king, the main character's father, in direct combat, defeating him and then demanding he summon Somnus from the Old Wall so that he could have his revenge. The king passed out, but Somnus, clad in his golem shell, appeared nonetheless, and the two engaged in battle. Keep in mind that this would have been Somnus from the end of his life, after decades of building and maintaining a kingdom while also eradicating the Star Scourge. As they fought, Somnus indicated a lifelong remorse for what he'd done to Ardyn, though, as the gods had rejected Ardyn, Somnus still believed it was the best decision for the kingdom and the world at large. As such, though he knew his actions could never be forgiven, he hoped that Ardyn would, in the long run, understand that it had been the best option, sacrifice one for the all. Ardyn, after 2,000 years of imprisonment and the loss of the woman he loved due to his brother's betrayal, was having none of it and destroyed the golem. Still angry, Ardyn planned to strike down the still unconscious king as well, but was stopped by the god Bahamut, who transported the two elsewhere and proclaimed that Ardyn had a purpose, one that didn't involve killing the king. Instead, Bahamut told him that fate dictated Ardyn would be the scourge of the world, that it was Ardyn's destiny to spread the Star Scourge, a literal darkness, across the world to such a degree that the light, in the form of the chosen king, Noctis, the game's protagonist, would have no choice but to grow so powerful that it could snuff out the Star Scourge entirely, indicating that from the beginning it had been the plan for Ardyn to fall to corruption and spread it everywhere, so that when Noctis arose, he would need to have power capable of cleansing that corruption from every corner and dark cave in the world, so that the Star Scourge would be wiped out for good, rather than simply contained. Now that is some cold-hearted calculus right there.
Interestingly, because these events take place during the episode Ardyn DLC, where the player plays as Ardyn, you have the option of submitting to Bahamut's authority, pointing out that in the end, with Ardyn and Noctis' death, Somnus' line still ends, so screw it, why not? Or rejecting Bahamut's authority, telling he and the other gods to shove their plan, while Bahamut tries to make it clear that fate cannot be denied. Period. But either way, once back in the real world and given time to think about things, Ardyn bitterly decides that he'd infected the world with the Star Scourge all right, but that he wasn't just going to let the gods have their way. He'd burned the world they were so intent on cleansing to ash and laugh in their faces afterwards. But to do that, to truly get his revenge, now on the gods, and crush their dreams and plans, he'd need Noctis. According to prophecy, Noctis, as the chosen king, would need to not only come into his full powers as a guardian king of the crystal, which involved harnessing the power of the kings that had come before him, but also forge pacts with each of the gods, besides Ifrit, and then infuse himself with the power of the crystal. You know, the soul of the world. Which meant that Noctis had a steep hill to climb from the game's start to the game's end.
As such, Ardyn assisted Noctis, pushing him further and further to expedite Noctis' growth. From simple things like using his political clout to allow Noctis and friends access to otherwise restricted places, to more jarring acts like killing Noctis' fiancée, the current Oracle, before Noctis' very eyes and kidnapping his friends. Ultimately, Ardyn's plan succeeded. Noctis, as empowered as he could be without the crystal's power, was guided by Ardyn to the crystal and was sucked inside. For 10 years, Noctis waited, cocooned in an extra-dimensional realm, absorbing all of the power of the world's soul before he arose, ready to extinguish the Star Scourge and Ardyn, by now its source, for good. Ardyn was an idol during that time, though. During that same decade, he spread the Star Scourge to cover the globe and absorbed demons left and right to increase his power. Thus, the two finally clashed at the heights of their respective powers. Ardyn seemingly planning to end Noctis permanently, thwarting the god's plan and ending his brother's line, but eventually, Noctis prevailed, slaying Ardyn's body. Ardyn didn't seem terribly displeased, perhaps because he knew the effort of cleansing the world of the Star Scourge would kill Noctis, meaning that, in the end, though Ardyn didn't beat the gods, he still ended his brother's bloodline. With Ardyn dead, Noctis then absorbed the power of the fallen kings and traveled to the realm between life and death to meet Ardyn one final time. There, with Ardyn's corruption and soul laid bare, Noctis summoned the power of the world's soul, his own power and the might of the gods and fallen kings, turning essentially the full might of creation on Ardyn, who was held fast by the modern-day Oracle, Noctis' dead fiancé, with no escape. Ardyn died his final death, and the souls of Noctis and the modern-day Oracle slipped into the afterlife to rest. Thus, the threat of Ardyn and the Star Scourge was ended, and so too was ended the bloodlines of both the Guardians of the Crystal and the Oracles of the Gods.
And that's basically the story of Ardyn, Star Scourge of Final Fantasy XV. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave us a like, and if you know someone who might like this video, have them give it a watch. If you have ideas for videos you'd like to see us do in the future, do like Stephanie Reinking, and let us know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more videos from us in the future, be they lore or let's play, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.
In the meantime, this has been True Masters and Morons, signing off.
Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like it, hit this subscribe orb.
To see our last Let's Play, click or tap the link on the right.
For our last lore video, go to the link on the left.
And for a video chosen by the gods of YouTube from our channel, hit that link on top.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.